Have you ever dreamt of soaring through the clouds for a living? Pilot Instagram pages showing you picturesque sunsets from the cockpit can make it look like the ultimate dream job. But what if I told you the reality isn't all first class perks and high paychecks? Being a pilot comes with some hefty downsides that nobody posts on social media. Today, I'm going unfiltered to give you 10 solid reasons you might not want to become a pilot. Some of these might surprise you or even make you reconsider that flight school application. Strap in, because we're about to hit some turbulence on the journey to the truth. What to expect? Before we take off into the list, here's how we'll navigate this episode. I'm going to break down the 10 big reasons that could ground your pilot dreams. We'll cover everything from the insane costs of training and the years of grinding with low pay to the crazy schedules, health hurdles, and the harsh reality of today's job market. Each reason comes with real-world stats, a bit of humor, and some eye-opening stories. Yes, I've got a few of those as a flight instructor. By the end of this hour, you'll either thank me for saving you from a huge mistake, or you'll be even more sure that flying is in your blood. Because trust me, you'll need that passion to survive in this field. Let's dive in. Here are 10 reasons why you might not want to become a pilot. Reason 10, the training is long and expensive. Becoming a pilot isn't like getting a simple college degree or picking up a quick certificate. It's a massive investment of time and money. Let's start with the financial shocker. Flight training costs a fortune. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars upfront ever before you earn a dime in the cockpit. In the US, going from zero experience to an airline-ready pilot can cost somewhere around $80,000 or more. One flight academy estimates about $74,000 in tuition, around $83K after fees for a full program, and globally the price tag can range from $70,000 up to $150,000. Just let that sink in. That's like buying a luxury car or putting down a hefty down payment on a house, except instead of a house, you get a stack of flight books and a logbook full of hours. And it's not just money, it's time. Earning your license and ratings, private, pilot, instrument, commercial, multi-engine, and maybe flight instructor, can take years of dedication. The FAA requires 1,500 hours of flight time before you can even get hired at an airline. There are a few exceptions, but generally that's the rule. 1,500 hours. If you're flying as much as you legally can, that still might take 2 years of full-time flying after you finish your initial training. Many aspiring airline pilots slog through instructing students or flying skydiving planes every weekend just to build those hours. I've been there. I'm an instructor. I'm logging hours morning to night, 6 days a week. It's a grind. Let me put it in perspective with a quick story. A friend of mine thought that he could fast track the process. He financed a really costly accelerated program, imagining he'd be in an airline cockpit in a year. Spoiler alert, a year later, he had his commercial license and a 6-figure loan, but still needed to build another 1,000 hours of experience. There are no shortcuts. He ended up flight instructing for 2 more years, barely earning enough to cover interest on that loan. More on instructor pay later. The point is, training to be a pilot is a marathon, not a sprint. You'll spend countless early mornings in class, late nights studying regulations, and long afternoons practicing landings. It can be mentally and physically draining, and all the while, it's draining your bank account too. Now, if you love flying, maybe you'll see this investment as totally worth it. But if you're on the fence about aviation, the sheer upfront cost and time commitment should give you pause. Unlike many careers, you can't just dabble in piloting. You either commit fully and empty your wallet, or you don't get off the ground. And remember, there's absolutely no refund on those flight school loans if you change your mind halfway through. I've had students who ran out of money mid-training or realized that flying wasn't for them halfway through after spending thousands of dollars. It's not a fun place to be. So ask yourself, are you ready to invest years of your life and potentially the price of a small condo into training, and all before you earn your first paycheck as a pilot? If that question alone makes you sweat, you might want to hold short of the runway on this career path. So suppose you do pull it off. You pay the money, put in the time, and finally get all your licenses. What's next? Well, that leads us to our next reason you might want to think twice. Reason number 9, landing your first job is tough. So you've powered through flight school. Congrats. Now comes the next harsh reality. Finding that first pilot job, you might assume that airlines will be lining up to hire you once you have the required certificates and flight hours. After all, we've heard talks of pilot shortages in the news, right? But here's the truth, there's no guarantee of a job waiting for you. In fact, in today's market, competition is fiercer than ever, and many freshly minted pilots struggle to land that coveted first airline gig. Let's talk current events for a second. In the post-pandemic hiring boom around 2023 to 2022, airlines couldn't hire pilots fast enough. It was like an all-you-can-eat buffet for new pilots. Majors and regionals were scooping up anyone with the minimum hours. Bonuses were sky high, and it felt like everyone with a license was getting a call. But by 2024 and into 2025, things changed big time. Hiring has slowed down to pre-pandemic levels or worse. To give you an idea, the US airlines hired over 12,000 pilots in 2023, but in 2024 they hired only about 4,834. That's a huge drop from an all-time peak of roughly 13,000 new pilots hired in 2022, down to roughly one-third of that in 2024. In early 2025, the trend continued downward. What does that mean for you? Lots of newly qualified pilots are competing for fewer openings. I attended a hiring seminar recently where an industry expert put it bluntly. During the boom, airlines were hiring like crazy, and pilots didn't even need to network. Jobs were falling into their laps. Now, he said, pilots are back to making the rounds at job fairs and polishing up resumes because it is harder to get those jobs. I've seen this firsthand. I know people that have the required 1,500 hours who expected to jump right into an airline, and instead they're stuck waiting or sending out dozens of applications. Some have to get creative, moving abroad, flying cargo, going corporate just to build more experience until the airlines start hiring widely again. And it's not just the major airlines that are tough to crack. Even regional airlines, the typical first step to the majors, can afford to be picky now because they're not as desperate as they were a couple of years ago. Picture this. You finally meet the minimum requirements, but so do thousands of other pilots. HR at airlines is now sifting through piles of resumes, and you're not just competing with your flight school buddies. You're up against military pilots, pilots from other countries, and everyone who got furloughed or delayed during COVID and is now back on the market. It's a crowded field. To illustrate, one of my coworkers, let's call him Jake, hit his 1,500 hours and eagerly applied to a well-known regional airline. A year prior, that airline was practically begging for pilots and offering quick interview slots. But when Jake applied in late 2024, he didn't hear back for months. When he finally got a response, they told him the next training classes were delayed and smaller than expected. He ended up having to wait and keep instructing longer than he planned. And trust me, he was frustrated. He had this sinking feeling of, I did everything right. Why can't I get hired? The hard truth is that becoming a pilot doesn't come with a job placement guarantee. You might finish training during an industry downturn or just when airlines have met their hiring goals for the year. Economy goes down, or oil prices spike, or a global event hits, and suddenly airlines freeze hiring. Even the best timing is partly luck. As of now, the 2025 market is tight. Airlines are still hiring, especially some regionals and cargo operators, but nowhere near the record pace of the previous years. That means you need backup plans and a lot of persistence. You might have to relocate to wherever the job is or take a less glamorous flying job first, towing banners or aerial survey work to keep your hours up until an airline slot opens. So if you're considering this career, ask yourself, can you handle uncertainty and patience? Because you might not land that dream airline job the moment you're qualified. You could be stuck in career limbo for a while, chasing opportunities. Not everyone has the stomach for that kind of uncertainty after investing so much in training. Now, let's assume you beat the odds and snagged that first flying job. Congratulations. But don't break out the champagne yet. Our next reason covers a reality check that hits many new pilots hard: the paycheck. Reason number 8, low pay in the early years. You'll be broke well before you're rich. You might say, I heard pilots make great money, 6-figure salaries, right? Well, yes and no. Senior airline captains can make a very, very comfortable living. We're talking about $400,000 a year. It's a big but. Those impressive salaries after many years in the industry. When you're first starting, the pay can be shockingly low given the skills and responsibilities involved. In other words, you might be flying high in the sky, but your bank account will be pretty close to the ground for a while. Let's break it down. Remember that massive training cost we discussed? Unless you're fortunate enough to have it paid for by, say, the military or a wealthy benefactor, you probably had to take out loans or empty savings to finance it. That means many new pilots start their careers with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Now enter the entry-level pilot job, often as a flight instructor or a regional airline first officer. Flight instructing is a common first job to build hours, and it's not known for high pay. Many instructors work long hours at modest hourly rates. I know instructors, myself included, who made roughly $25,000 to $40,000 a year, basically near minimum wage, if you calculate the hours spent at the airport. I survived on instant noodles, FBO popcorn, and black coffee in the early days of my instructing career, while I was watching other friends in other industries pull a steady salary while I was grinding away for peanuts, although it's peanuts with a view of the sky. Okay, but what about when you do get to the airlines? Regional airlines, which are the smaller carriers that operate the feeder flights for major airlines, have historically been low paying for first officers. The good news is that recent pilot shortages forced regionals to raise pay substantially. Today, a brand new first officer at a U.S. regional airline might earn around $6,000 to $8,000 a month before taxes. To start, that's roughly $70,000 to $95,000 a year. That's not too bad. True. You might think, well, that's not too bad. And that's true. That's a lot better than the horror stories from 10 to 15 years ago when regional pilots sometimes made $20,000 to $30,000. But keep in mind a few things. That's $70,000 to $95,000 in before taxes and deductions, like union dues, 401k, etc. After Uncle Sam takes his cut, your take home might be considerably less. If you have a heavy loan payment from training, a good chunk of that salary will go straight to Sally Mae or whichever lender financed your flight training. Paying off, say, an $80,000 loan on an $80,000 salary is no picnic. You'll be living on a tight budget for years. As a new pilot, you might have to relocate or commute to your base. We'll talk more about that later. Living in a crash pad or paying for a second apartment near your base can eat into your earnings. One story of a pilot I read online, let's call her Sarah. She finally got hired by a regional after years of instructing. She was thrilled about the bump in pay on paper, but after she budgeted it out, reality hit her. Between her student loan payments, crash pad rent near her base, and expenses back home, she still could barely scrape together savings. In her first year flying passengers, she accepted driving her 15-year-old beater car and lived with roommates. The glamorous pilot life didn't quite materialize in her bank statements. She even joked that per hour of actual time away from home, not just flight hours, but all the duty time, she was making pretty close to minimum wage. A lot of hurry up and wait for not a lot of cash. It gets better with time, absolutely. By year 3 to 5 at a regional, you could upgrade to captain and possibly break into the mid six figures. And if you make it to a major airline, the pay jumps a lot with each year of seniority. First year first officers at majors are now often making well over $100,000, and by year 5 to 10, it can double. But again, reaching that point takes years of paying your dues. You may spend much of your 20s or longer living quite frugally. The big picture, if you're drawn to piloting for quick financial gain, think again. It's more of a long-term career payoff. The early career financial struggle is real, and it's a reason some people quit or never pursue aviation at all. I've seen classmates from flight school drop out when they realized they wouldn't be earning a stable, high salary until maybe their 30s. They pivoted to other careers that offered a steadier income sooner. So if you're not prepared to tighten your belt and live modestly for a while, you'll be in for a rude awakening. Becoming a pilot is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Yes, the money can be great eventually, but you have to survive the lean years first. This is one of those truths that gets glossed over by the allure of those captain salaries you see in headlines. Can you really handle a few years of ramen noodles? That might be your reality before the salary soars. Money isn't everything. Of course, maybe you're okay being broke for a while as long as you get to fly. That's a fair trade for some. But how about your time and lifestyle? The next few reasons are all about how being a pilot wreaks havoc on your daily life, starting with your schedule. Reason number 7, crazy schedules. Say goodbye to 9 to 5s and weekends. If you love the idea of a predictable routine, weekends off, home for dinner every night, a regular sleep schedule, then aviation will shock you. A pilot's life is the polar opposite of a typical 9 to 5 job. Airlines operate 24/7, 365, which means as a pilot, you will too. Regular hours are the norm. Think 4 a.m. wake-up calls, red-eye flights, weekend and holiday duty, and trips that keep you away from home for days on end. This profession will turn your concept of time upside down. Let's paint a picture of the schedules many pilots endure, especially in the early years when you have no seniority. We'll talk more about seniority later. As the lowest person on the totem pole, you get the leftover trips that senior pilots don't want. That often means working on Christmas Day, flying the early morning, dark 30 departures, or sitting reserve, which is on call, during the prime hours when everyone else is relaxing. One pilot on Reddit vividly remembers that one of their first months on reserve at a company, they spent Thanksgiving alone in a hotel in a random city eating dinner out of a vending machine because he was on call for a flight that never actually happened. Meanwhile, his family was having turkey without him. That's the kind of schedule reality you sign up for. No weekends off are common. Your weekend might be Tuesday and Wednesday, or you might not get 2 days off in a row at all. Sometimes it's one day off, then back to flying. And when you do get multiple days off, they might not align with your friends or your partners. I like to joke about my schedule as an instructor because my calendar looks like someone threw paint at it. Work days and off days scattered seemingly at random. It can be really hard to plan anything in your personal life. Weddings, birthdays, family gatherings, you'll miss some of those guaranteed. Early mornings? Oh yeah. Many domestic flights start boarding at 6 or 7 a.m., which means the cruise day might start at 4 a.m. or earlier. Ever try to be fully alert and ready to make complex decisions at 5 in the morning with passengers' lives in your hands? Most say that you adapt, but it's tough. And if you're not a morning person now, you'll be forced to become one on some days. Well, on other days, you might be a night owl because the very next week, your schedule could have you flying until midnight or later. Red-eye flights, which are overnight cross-country slogs, are a special kind of torture for the uninitiated. Departing at 10 p.m. and landing at sunrise, your body screaming, "What are you doing to me?" As a junior pilot, you may get a lot of those since they're unpopular trips. Oh, and say goodbye to the traditional concept of holidays. Airlines don't close for Christmas or New Year's or even during pandemics. Well, not unless they're forced to. Holidays are some of the busiest travel days, so guess who's working? Pilots and flight crews. Pilots ring in the new year at 30,000 feet somewhere over the Atlantic and spend Christmas Eve in a hotel room, FaceTiming their family. It's a strange feeling the first time hearing about everyone else relaxing and celebrating while you're out flying. Many pilots and their families adjust by celebrating occasionally on alternate days. They'll have Thanksmas on December 28th when they're back from their trip. It's doable, but it's certainly not the hallmark holiday lifestyle. The erratic schedules also mean constant jet lag and fatigue, which we'll dive deeper into next. Imagine having breakfast in New York, lunch in Chicago, and dinner in Los Angeles all in one day, crossing time zones back and forth. Now do that several days in a row, your body's internal clock gets utterly confused. There's a saying, time zones are just a social construct. For pilots, it's always pilot time. There are flights that started in the evening local time, flew overnight, and landed the next morning in another time zone, then slept during the day and did it again. After a week of that pattern, you honestly forget what day it is. And here's a fun schedule quirk: reserve, standby. When you're new, you spend a lot of time on reserve, meaning you must be ready to fly on short notice if someone else gets sick or a flight needs a substitute pilot. You might have to sit by the phone or stay within a short drive of the airport for an entire block of days. That means you can't relax. You might get a call at 5 a.m. saying, be at the airport in 2 hours to operate a flight to XYZ. Your plans for the day? Instantly canceled. Even your sleep is tentative because you're half listening for that 3 a.m. phone ring from crew scheduling. Being on reserve can feel like you're a doctor on call, except instead of saving lives in the ER, you're getting pulled up to fly a jet at random times. It's a weird mix of adrenaline and boredom. The bottom line, if you crave routine and sleep regularity, this career will drive you nuts. Your circadian rhythm will be doing somersaults. Some people adapt and even enjoy the variety that no 2 weeks are the same, and some find that exciting. But plenty of others burn out because the schedule is so punishing, especially on the body and social life. Which brings us to another closely related reason not to become a pilot: the toll this lifestyle takes on your health. We've established the schedule is chaotic. What does that do to your body and health? The next reason is a big one that often gets overlooked in the glamour shots of piloting. Reason number 6, health risks and strict medical requirements. Flying for a living isn't just hard on your sleep schedule, it can be tough on your health overall. And the irony is you need to stay very healthy to keep flying because pilots must pass regular medical exams. If your health falters, your entire career can be put on pause or even ended. It's a constant source of stress that most people in other jobs just don't face. The knowledge that an unexpected medical issue could essentially cost you your career. Let's talk about the physical toll of the job. Pilots deal with frequent jet lag, disrupted sleep, and high stress. We'll talk about stress in a little bit. Over the years, this can contribute to issues like chronic fatigue, poor sleep quality, and even more serious conditions. Studies have shown that constantly changing time zones and working odd hours can increase risk for things like cardiovascular problems, gastrointestinal issues, and depression. Not to mention, when you're flying at high altitudes frequently, you're exposed to more cosmic radiation. Yes, being at 35,000 feet regularly has slightly higher radiation exposure than on the ground. It's not usually at dangerous levels for most airline pilots, but it's an interesting quirk of the job. You get higher doses of radiation, which has been a concern for long-haul pilots and flight attendants over decades-long careers. Then there's the lifestyle aspect. It can be hard to maintain a healthy diet and exercise routine as a pilot. You're often eating at restaurants or hotel food, grabbing fast food between flights, and sitting for long hours in the plane. I'll admit it, even over the course of being a CFI, I've downed my share of frozen burritos. Some pilots manage to be very disciplined. They work out on layovers and pack healthy meals, but many struggle. Over time, weight gain or other health issues can creep up. I've known pilots who've developed diabetes or a hypertension, which becomes a big problem because enter the FAA medical exam. To be a commercial pilot, you must hold a valid medical certificate. For airline pilots under the age of 40, that means a first-class medical exam every 12 months, or every 6 months if you're over the age of 40. This is not your casual annual physical where your doctor just says, looking good, see you next year. Aviation medical exams are quite strict. There's a list of disqualifying conditions a mile long. For instance, certain heart conditions, uncontrolled diabetes, serious mental health disorders, epilepsy, vision that can't be corrected to 20/20, and so on, can ground you. Even something like using certain medications can be disqualifying. And if you have any hint of these issues, you often have to go through a lot of hoops, additional testing, special issuance waivers, to convince the authorities you're still fit to fly. This means pilots live with a bit of underlying fear. What if my body betrays me and I lose my medical? Imagine spending 10 to 15 years building your career, finally making good money as a captain, and then say you develop a medical condition in your 50s that forces you to stop flying. It happens. I've met an airline captain who had to retire early because of an unexpected minor heart issue, something many people live with while working desk jobs. But for him, it meant he could not hold a first-class medical. One day he's flying a Boeing 777, the next day he's done. Career over, income gone, well before the mandatory retirement age. It was devastating for him both financially and emotionally. Speaking of mandatory retirement age, there's another factor. In the US, airline pilots must retire by age 65. It's federal law. There was a recent debate about raising it to 67, but as of 2024, it stayed at 65. So even if you're perfectly healthy and love flying, at 65, you're shown the door. If you start your pilot career late, this mandatory cutoff might shorten your potential career span more than you'd like. For example, if you become an airline pilot at 50, you have at most 15 years to fly. Compare that to other careers where you could work into your late 60s or 70s if you choose. This is a reason not to become a pilot for some older folks. Considering a career change, the clock might simply run out on you. Now let's circle back to the ongoing health maintenance. Pilots, especially as they age, often stress about their medical exams. I've heard it jokingly called the most important test a pilot takes, and it happens twice a year. Before every exam, pilots will get some sort of anxiety. Will they find something this time? High blood pressure readings have ended careers. So some pilots are extra careful to reduce caffeine and salt before their exam, essentially doing everything to pass their medical. It's a bit of a sword hanging over your head. There's also the mental health angle. Historically, pilots faced stigma around seeking help for mental health issues because a diagnosis could jeopardize their medical certification. Regulations have started to evolve, especially after some high-profile incidents, but it's still tricky. If you're struggling with depression or anxiety, you can't just waltz into a therapist's office and get medication. You have to consider how that will be viewed by the aviation medical examiner. It can discourage pilots from getting help, or they hide it, which is its problem. And let's not forget the everyday health threats. For instance, fatigue. Flying fatigued is dangerous, so there are rules to prevent it, but the rules don't eliminate the reality that you will often feel tired due to time zone shifts or early reports. You have to know your limits. I've had moments where I've told my boss I'm not fit to fly right now. I need a rest. It's a tough call to make because you don't want to be that person unless you truly have to. And once you get to the airlines, it can mess up the entire airline schedule, which they don't love. The fact that you might frequently be pushing up against your fatigue limits is a health red flag in itself. All of this is to say your health is both vitally important and somewhat at risk in this career. If you're someone who has health issues or is risk averse about medical stuff, the constant monitoring and physical strains might be a big reason to reconsider being a pilot. Being a pilot means committing to a healthy lifestyle as best as you can. And even then, you're at the mercy of genetics and fat, just like anyone. But unlike many careers, one stroke of bad health luck could end everything you've worked for. That's heavy. Speaking of heavy, let's talk about something equally weighty: your personal life. You might be willing to sacrifice comfort and endure stress, but how about sacrificing time with family and friends? The next reason is a heartbreaker for many pilots. Reason number 5, missing family events and strained relationships. One of the hardest truths about being a pilot is how much you'll miss out at home. While you're busy flying across the country or the globe, life back home marches on without you. Birthdays, anniversaries, kids' soccer games, even the mundane Tuesday night dinners with your family. If you value being present for those moments, the pilot lifestyle will test you severely. Maintaining relationships, marriages, parenting, friendships can be incredibly challenging when you're constantly away. Let's start with family. Imagine you have a spouse or partner. They'll often have to operate like a single parent or a single household manager when you're gone. Say you're on a 4-day trip, that's 4 days your partner handles everything alone. Getting the kids to school, fixing the leaky faucet, dealing with any emergencies that pop up, all while you're states away. Sure, technology helps. You can FaceTime at night from your hotel. You hear stories about pilots reading bedtime stories to their kids via FaceTime, but you're still absent in a very real sense. And sometimes the time zone difference or flight schedule means you can't even make that call. There will be nights where you are left on a trip, and by the time you land, the family's already asleep. Or you're there prepping for an early morning flight the next day and they were still asleep. You can go days without a real conversation. It can put strain on even the strongest relationships. Speaking of strain, there's a reason you might have heard jokes about pilots' divorce rates. Well, it's hard to pin down exact statistics. The lifestyle of a pilot, long absences, stress, and sometimes the temptation of being in far-flung places has a reputation for contributing to marital problems. Now, I'll be fair. Many pilot marriages are rock solid and built on good communication and understanding. But it takes work. Your partner needs to be on board, no pun intended, with your career choice. Jealousy or trust issues can flare up for some couples, given the unique situation of one partner constantly traveling and often socializing with the crew. I've known pilots who ended up divorced in part because their spouse just couldn't handle them being away so often. The resentment built up over missed holidays and loneliness. On the flip side, I also know pilots who joke that the secret to a happy marriage is being gone half the month. They say it keeps the relationship fresh because they're so excited to reunite. Every relationship is different, but the key is if you become a pilot, it's not just you sacrificing. Your loved ones sacrifice a lot of time with you. Now consider if you have children or plan to. Being a pilot parent can be rough. You might miss your baby's first steps, or the school play, or high school graduation if it falls on a day you just cannot get out of flying. Sure, you can try to bidding your schedule around important dates, and often you'll probably succeed, but not always. Airlines try to accommodate, but operational needs come first. I recall a senior captain telling me a story early in his career. He missed his daughter's birth because he was mid-flight when she went into labor early. He didn't find out until after he landed and he got a message. He said it was one of the worst moments of his life. That kind of thing sticks with you. And even in less extreme cases, you'll have the routine heartaches. Missing Mother's Day, being gone for your kid's birthday party. Maybe you celebrate later, but it's not the same day. Not being there to help them with homework or coach Little League because you're out on a trip. It's not just immediate family either. Your social life in general can suffer. Friends might eventually assume you're not available and stop inviting you to things. He's probably flying, he can't make it. You might find your friend circle shrinking or only consisting of other pilots who get the lifestyle. When you're home on random Tuesday afternoons, everyone else is working. On Friday nights, when people gather, you might be leaving on a trip. You definitely lose touch with friends because you just aren't around for gatherings. It takes extra effort to stay connected when you have an unconventional schedule. And let's address loneliness. Yes, you're surrounded by coworkers and passengers, but on layovers, you might find yourself alone in a hotel room in a city where no one knows you. It can get lonely. Human connections can feel distant when you're always away or on the move. Some people thrive in that environment and enjoy the me time. Others really struggle with the lack of consistent community. As a CFI, I've had stretches where I felt like a stranger in my own home because I was working so much. I had to reconnect with my family and routine every time I returned, only to disrupt it again when I left. Now, for those who aren't deterred by this, there are coping strategies. Many pilots' families adapt with strong routines and support systems, like extended family or friends help out, or the pilot and spouse are really good at planning quality time together. Some pilots even involve their family by having them join on occasional trips, if possible. A perk is discounted travel, so your family might fly out to meet you somewhere fun during a layover. It happens. But even with the best systems in place, you will experience heartache from the moments missed. You will have times sitting in the hotel looking at pictures of a family gathering that you're not at, wondering if you made the right career choice. So ask yourself and your loved ones, if you have them, are you ready for the long stretches apart? Can we handle being gone for significant chunks of time every month? If the answer is no, or even a hesitation, that's a valid reason to rethink becoming a pilot. Because the reality is the airplanes don't stop flying just because you want to be home on a Friday night. Up to now, we've covered money, schedules, health, and family. All significant quality of life issues. But we haven't even gotten to one of the core aspects of the job itself, the intensity the intense responsibility and stress that come with becoming a pilot. Buckle up, that's next. Reason number 4, high stress and enormous responsibility. Being a pilot might not be as visibly stressful as, say, an ER doctor, saving lives in front of them. On a good day, flying is actually pretty routine and chill. But make no mistake, when you sign up to fly airplanes, you are taking on a huge amount of responsibility, and that can be incredibly stressful. Even on those routine days, in the back of your mind, you know, I'm responsible for the safety of everyone on this aircraft. The weight of potentially life and death decisions rests on your shoulders every time you go to work. Not everyone is built to handle that kind of pressure day in and day out. Let's talk about the obvious, safety as a pilot. You can't have an off day where you zone out or slack off. The one time you neglect a checklist or mishear an instruction could lead to serious incident. Aviation is extremely unforgiving of errors. That's why the training is so rigorous and the rules are so strict. But even with all the precautions, you will occasionally face situations that spike your adrenaline. Maybe it's a sudden mechanical issue. Maybe severe unexpected turbulence or a passenger medical emergency or scary weather on approach. In those moments, all eyes are on the pilots to solve the problem calmly and correctly. I personally have had in-flight situations that definitely got my heart racing. For example, we had a light start blinking at us when I was with a student on his first flight, saying that there was something mechanically wrong with the plane. Even though I trained for it and everything turned out fine, in that moment, the stress hits like a truck, sweating, hyper-focused, running through checklists, communicating with my passengers, and possibly if we were going somewhere, we would have had to divert the flight. When it was over, I felt like I aged a year in an hour. Even day to day, consider that every takeoff and landing has to be done right. Constantly thinking ahead. What's our backup plan if the weather suddenly deteriorates? Is that other plane on the taxiway going to move as expected? Did I program the right altitude into the autopilot? It's a mental game of being alert and on top of things all the time. And because of that, many pilots, myself included, find it hard to relax even when things are normal. You're trained to anticipate problems, so your mind is often racing through what if. That level of constant vigilance can be mentally exhausting. Now add the external pressures. Airlines have tight schedules, so delays can cause stress. Safety is always number one, but you'll still feel the squeeze if you're running late due to weather or some issues. There's an entire plane of passengers back there, maybe getting annoyed or anxious. And sometimes you have to be the bearer of bad news. You have to tell your passengers that we have to go hold due to weather, or we have a minor technical issue and we need to return back to the airport. In an age where everything can go viral, you also worry about it being recorded or judged for every decision. Pilots are human, but we're expected to perform perfectly every time. It's like being an athlete where one mistake is front page news. And speaking of being human, emergencies do happen. Rarely, but they do. The level of training and redundancy in aviation is so high that they're extremely rare, but any pilot who's been flying long enough has a story or two. Maybe an engine failure, a loss in cabin pressure, a system outage, or encountering wind shear on final. These are situations that would make the average person absolutely panic. But as a pilot, you're trained to respond methodically. Even so, during and after these events, the stress can be immense. I know a pilot who dealt with a severe in-flight emergency once. Everyone ended up safe, don't worry. He confided that while he appeared calm on the outside, inside he felt like a duck on a pond. Above water, he was serene. Below the surface, his legs, or heart, paddling like crazy. That incident took such a toll that he told me he didn't sleep properly for days afterward. We were playing everything in his mind. Another stress factor, constant evaluation. Pilots undergo regular simulator check rides, which we'll talk more about in the next section, line checks in the aircraft, and are subject to random inspections. Like, you're always being observed by training captains, by the company, by the FAA, knowing that any flight could be a proficiency check, or that any mistake could be scrutinized adds a background level of performance anxiety. Even interactions with air traffic control are recorded. Pilots have a mantra: every transmission on the radio is basically public record, so don't say something stupid. Not a normal concern in most jobs. Also, consider the more subtle stresses, decision fatigue. As a pilot, you make countless decisions, big and small, each flight. From pre flight planning, fuel, routes, weight and balance, to in flight, adjusting for weather, maybe rerouting, dealing with air traffic control instructions, making a go no go decision to land. Some of these decisions don't have a clear right answer. You just have to use judgment. For instance, if the weather at your destination is getting worse, do you divert early or try an approach? There's fuel and passenger comfort on one hand, safety and company policies on the other. It's stressful because you know your decision will be second guessed in hindsight if something goes wrong. All of this is not to say pilots are nervous wrecks. By and large, we compartmentalize stress well and follow procedures to mitigate it. Internally, over years, this pressure cooker environment can lead to burnout or health effects. Remember those blood pressure concerns? Yep, stress contributes. Some pilots find they become irritable or numb in their personal life because they use so much mental energy at work. There's a reason mandatory rest periods exist. The job can be mentally draining to the point you must have time off to recharge, or mistakes will happen. If you're someone who doesn't handle stress well or doesn't want a job where a mistake can have such dire consequences, that's a perfectly valid reason not to become a pilot. Some people realize they prefer a job where maybe the worst outcome of a day is a lost sale or a displeased client, not a bent airplane. The responsibility in aviation is huge. You literally have dozens or hundreds of lives in your hand each flight. That gravity isn't for everyone, and if you do take it on, it will change you. Hopefully in good ways. It might make you more disciplined, confident, but it does cost a price in mental load. Now, as if high stress during normal operations isn't enough, imagine having to prove yourself over and over through tests your entire career. That's another aspect of a pilot's life that can be a deal breaker for some, and it's our next reason. Reason number 3, training never stops. Constant tests and check rides. Think the exams and check rides, and once you get your pilot's license or land that job, think again. As a pilot, you will be in school and under the microscope for your entire career. Continuous training and testing are built into the profession. Some people love the challenge of lifelong learning. Others find the never-ending scrutiny to be a source of anxiety. If you fall into the latter camp, consider this a big warning. Let's start with the basics. Every 6 to 12 months, airline pilots have to undergo recurrent training. Typically, it's a simulator session, or several, where you practice emergency procedures and get evaluated by a training captain or examiner. You'll be tossed all sorts of scenarios: engine failures, hydraulic problems, bad weather, approaches. You name it. It's your job to handle them according to proper procedures. Basically, you have to prove regularly that you still know how to handle the worst day imaginable. And yes, you can fail these checks if you perform poorly. Failing a check ride as an employed pilot is kind of a big deal. It often means remedial training at best. If you can't fix the issues, it could even end your employment. So every time a simulator check comes up on your calendar, a little pit performs in your stomach. Even experienced pilots get the heebie-jeebies before a check ride. The nerves and over-preparation that happen right before recurrent training or a check ride, you see folks pacing, reviewing emergency memory items for the 100th time, gulping coffee, trying to psych themselves up. It's like sitting finals week twice a year, every year for your whole career. And that's not an exaggeration. I know some 60-year-old captains with 30 plus years of flying behind them who still get nervous for the simulator checks. Beyond the simulator, there are knowledge tests too. For example, airlines often administer regular quizzes on operating procedures or changes in regulations, and the FAA can require you to take a written test when you take a check ride. There are also random line checks where an examiner or check airman will ride along on a normal flight to observe you in action. Imagine doing your regular job with a supervisor literally sitting behind you with a clipboard. That's what a line check is. Even if you're confident, it adds pressure knowing someone is watching your every radio call and switch flip. You hear stories where you have a line check where the check airman doesn't say a single word the whole flight. They just watch and take notes. It's nerve-wracking, even though you know that you're doing the right things. Only after landing do they say, "Good job." Until then, you're sweating bullets. And don't forget initial training for every new aircraft or new company. That can be like drinking from a fire hose. Learning an entirely new jet system in a matter of weeks with big exams at the end. I have vivid memories of nights in my room poring over aircraft manuals and schematics until 2 a.m., trying to cram every limit and procedure into my brain because my check ride was the next day. The feeling was reminiscent of days when you're back in school, except if you fail, it's not a letter grade at stake, it's potentially your job or future jobs. That pressure is intense. The constant cycle of training means you have to keep your study habits sharp, even decades after you're done with school. Some people might find that exciting. You're always learning, never stagnant. And I agree, aviation does keep you on your toes intellectually. But let's be real, it can also be exhausting. Not everyone enjoys perpetual testing. I've seen colleagues who are fantastic pilots or instructors, great with passengers, smooth on the controls, handle flights excellently, but they choke when it comes to check rides because it's a very artificial, high-pressure environment. It's sadly not uncommon to struggle with a check ride and face the stress of retraining or possible job loss or loss of future jobs. I'll share an anecdote. A senior first officer I knew, let's call him Mike, was up for upgrade to captain. He had been flying for 15 years and was extremely competent. But during his upgrade training, the extra pressure of being in the left seat and knowing he was being evaluated seemed to mess with his head. He actually failed an engine-out approach in the simulator, something he could normally do in his sleep. He had to do remedial training, which was tough on his confidence. He confided in me later that he hadn't felt test anxiety like that since he was a student pilot. It was humbling for him, and he eventually passed on his retest and became a great captain. But he said those few weeks were the worst stress of his life. He barely slept, lost weight, and felt like his entire career was on the line, because essentially it was. In many other careers, once you're qualified and hired, the exams stop, aside from maybe occasional professional development. In aviation, the exams never stop. Every year, every new aircraft, every upgrade, even sometimes a surprise line check, you are continuously evaluated. If you're someone who loathes tests or crack under pressure, this could be a nightmare. It's honestly a reason some people step away from commercial flying. I've known people who became private or corporate pilots partially to avoid the rigid airline training schedules. Though they still have to do training, it could be slightly less formal depending on the operation. To sum it up, becoming a pilot means committing to being a student and a test taker forever. If you're not okay with that, it could be a major reason not to pursue this career. Now, let's talk about something that might seem trivial in comparison to life and death responsibility, but it profoundly shapes a pilot's career: the seniority system and career progression. This next reason might not be obvious to outsiders, but it has huge implications for your professional life. Reason number 2, seniority rules your life. You have little control over your career. In most jobs, if you work hard and excel, you can earn promotions, switch companies for better opportunities, or negotiate your position. In the airline pilot world, merit takes a back seat to something called seniority. Seniority is king. It dictates everything from your schedule to what aircraft you fly, to whether you upgrade to captain, and even whether you keep your job during layoffs. The catch? Seniority is purely a function of time, how long you've been at the company, and it doesn't transfer between airlines. This system can be frustrating and is definitely a reason why some people shy away from the airline pilot career. Here's how it works. When you get hired by an airline, you're assigned a seniority number at the bottom of the list. From that day on, your entire career at that airline is determined by that number, which slowly improves as people above you retire or leave and as new people join below you. Want weekends off or Christmas off? Only if your seniority is high enough to hold that schedule. Want to upgrade to captain? Only when enough people above you either upgrade or leave, so that it's your turn. It doesn't matter if you're the best pilot in the company. You could have flawless performance and a great attitude, but you won't get promoted to captain until your number comes up. Conversely, even a mediocre pilot could get promoted eventually if they just stick around and enough time passes, provided they keep passing checks, of course. This can be maddening for ambitious go-getters. In many careers, if you're a star, you climb faster. In airlines, everyone climbs at essentially the same rate, the rate of attrition and company growth. If the company isn't growing or people aren't retiring, you sit in the same seat, same pay scale, potentially for years. There were regional pilots back in the 2000s who waited a decade to upgrade to captain because hiring was stagnant. On the flip side, when there's a rapid expansion, you might upgrade in just a couple of years. It's largely out of your control and depends on the market and timing. Again, the element of luck. Now, what if you think, fine, I'll just jump to a different airline where I can advance faster or have a better quality of life? Here's the rub. If you switch airlines, you start over at the bottom of the seniority list. All your years of service at Airline A don't count at Airline B. This makes pilots very reluctant to change jobs because it's a huge setback. Imagine being a mid-career pilot with decent seniority. Say you finally have some weekends off and a nice schedule, but another airline has better pay. If you move, you'll be back on the worst schedules, possibly on reserve and junior pay scales again. It can be a golden handcuff situation where you stick with one airline not out of loyalty, but because you can't afford to lose your hard-earned seniority. There's plenty of stories of pilots who turned down a dream job at a big airline because they already had 8 years at a smaller airline. And they do the math. You'd be first on the junior first officer again for years if he moved, whereas if he stayed, he'd upgrade to captain within one more year. He chose to stay put even though long-term the other airline might have offered a higher ceiling because starting over is that painful. Seniority also affects base assignments, which city you're based in. When you're junior, you often don't get to choose where you're assigned. Wherever the company needs you could be across the country from your home. If you want to later transfer to your hometown base, that only happens if your seniority allows, meaning that the people that have a higher seniority number than you don't want that base. Some pilots commute by plane from where they live to their base, which is another headache entirely. Often because moving family isn't feasible and they don't hold the base they want. Commuting basically means on your off days, you spend half a day flying standby to get home. It's a tough lifestyle, and again, you endure it until your seniority lets you hold a base near home. Another kicker, in event of downsizing or furloughs, meaning layoffs, it's last hired, first fired. That means if the airline needs to cut pilots, the most junior pilots lose their jobs first. You could be a fantastic employee, but if you're junior, you're on the chopping block before a more senior, even if less stellar pilot would be. And if things improve and they recall pilots, they recall in seniority order. If you were bottom of the list, you might be waiting years to be recalled, or you might never get called back if the airline doesn't fully recover. This happened to many pilots after 9/11 and again after 2020's pandemic hit. Thousands of junior pilots were furloughed. Some waited it out, others had to find new careers or start over at other airlines when hiring resumed. Seniority means patience is a virtue. You can't jump positions or negotiate a better seat like you could negotiate a raise in a corporate job. You pay your dues and eventually you get the privileges of seniority, like better pay, choice of schedule, choice of aircraft type perhaps, can affect pay too. But until then, you suck it up. For some, especially younger people who see their friends' job hopping in tech or other fields and quickly climbing, this can be frustrating. Lastly, seniority impacts which aircraft and routes you can fly. Maybe you dream of flying the big international jets. At a major airline, those positions, especially in popular bases like, say, being in a 787 captain in New York, are held by very senior pilots. You might spend years as a first officer on domestic routes before a slot on the international fleet opens at your seniority. If you're itching for a certain plane type or long-haul travel, you often have to wait in line. There's a story of a junior first officer wishing that they could just fly to Europe or Asia, but you get stuck doing short-haul domestic hops because that's what their seniority held. Now, it eventually came, but it takes time. In essence, the lack of control over your career progression is a major drawback. If you like to be in charge of your destiny, the airline world will humble you. It's more about timing and macro conditions than your individual performance. That can be demotivating for some people. So if you're considering becoming a pilot, be aware. You're signing up for a system where waiting your turn defines a lot of your success. If that bothers you, it's a serious reason to hesitate. We've arrived at the final reason, and it's a big one that ties many of the others together. It's something we touched on earlier and is often the elephant in the room whenever someone says, "Should I become a pilot?" It's time to talk about the overall stability or instability of the industry. Reason number one, an unstable industry, feast or famine, job security. Job security in aviation is often described as cyclical or feast or famine. Booming one year, bust the next. If you crave a stable, predictable career where you're relatively secure, the airline industry might make you queasy. And we hinted at this when we were discussing the job market for new pilots, but it goes beyond just getting hired. It's about the long-term job security and the stability of being a pilot. In short, it's not very stable. Consider the pattern over the past few decades. After the 9/11 attacks in 2001, air travel plummeted. Major airlines furloughed pilots by the thousands. Careers were put on hold or ended. Some pilots had to find other work for years. Then things recovered, and by mid-2000s, hiring resumed. Fast forward to the late 2010s, there's a talk of a pilot shortage due to many baby boomers retiring and increased travel demand. By 2019, airlines were aggressively recruiting. It was the feast part of the cycle. Then 2020 hits, the COVID-19 pandemic. Air travel basically stopped for a time. Airlines again parked and furloughed tens of thousands of pilots worldwide, almost overnight. It was arguably the worst downturn ever for aviation. Many pilots suddenly found themselves without a job. Some took early retirements, some drove Uber or worked in grocery stores to make ends meet, waiting for the storm to pass. By 2022 and 2023, travel rebounded strongly, and now airlines faced a shortage because they had lost so many pilots and because lots of people paused training during COVID. So we swung to extreme feast again, massive hiring, huge pay raises, sign-on bonuses. If you timed it right, you could walk into a great job, as we discussed. Now, as of 2024 and 2025, the frenzy is cooling off. The industry is normalizing. Hiring slowed significantly in 2024, and airlines are being more cautious. There's even talk of an oversupply in some markets because so many new pilots were trained during the hype. This roller coaster is simply how aviation works. It's tied to the economy, geopolitical events, even health crises. When things go bad, travel is one of the first sectors to feel it. And airlines cut back quickly because flying half-empty jets loses money fast. Pilots are expensive employees, training, salary, etc. So in downturns, we're often targets for cost-cutting, furloughs, etc. It's not like, say, healthcare, where demand is more constant. What does this mean for you as a prospective pilot? It means you have to be mentally and financially prepared for ups and downs. You might get hired and then furloughed a year later if the economy tanks. You might have a great run, then suddenly your airline goes bankrupt or merges with another, and you find yourself bumped back to a lower seniority list. Mergers often integrate seniority in ways that can disadvantage some pilots. Or you might be coasting towards planned retirement when something like a pandemic forces you into early retirement. A classic saying among pilots is plan on having multiple employers over your career. It's rare nowadays to start at one airline at 25 and retire from the same airline at 65 with a gold watch. Changes happen. Heck, the entire airlines disappear. Think of Pan Am, TWA, giants of the past that are gone. More recently, airlines like Thomas Cook in the UK collapsed suddenly, leaving pilots scrambling for jobs in the US. We've seen consolidations. Virgin America merged into Alaska, for example, and their pilots had to merge Seniority with Alaska's pilots. Those kinds of shifts can upend personal plans. Even if the industry overall is okay, your career progression can stall due to instability. If an airline isn't expanding, you aren't upgrading to captain anytime soon because no new seats are opening. Or if they downsize, you might get downgraded. Some captains in downturns get displaced back to first officer to save costs. It's not the kind of linear upward trajectory you might find in other fields. There's also the looming question of the future. Will technological changes disrupt piloting? People often ask, won't pilots be replaced by automation soon? My personal take, in the next few decades completely. Pilotless airliners are extremely unlikely. There's a lot of resistance and safety hurdles, but there are discussions about reducing cockpit crews, perhaps going from 2 pilots to 1 pilot in some flights with remote supervision, etc. If that ever happens, it would drastically cut pilot jobs. It's not science fiction. Cargo companies and even NASA have studied single pilot operation and autonomous systems. So far, regulations and public confidence keep 2 pilots in the cockpit. Who knows? By the time a new pilot today reaches their mid-career, the landscape could be different. At the very least, drones and advanced automation may erode some traditional pilot roles. Certainly has in the military and reconnaissance. So there's an undercurrent of uncertainty about how the role of a pilot might evolve in 20 to 30 years. That's not an immediate reason not to become a pilot, but it adds to the instability concern. To cope in such an unstable field, pilots often have to be financially savvy, saving more during good times to prepare for bad times. Wise to have an emergency fund or side skills. A lot of people get a degree in a different field as a backup. I know pilots who maintain a side business or real estate venture, partly in case they ever get furloughed. It's almost ingrained in pilot culture to be ready for the music to stop temporarily. If you prefer a career where you can steadily climb and not worry about sudden involuntary time off, aviation might not be for you. Some personalities actually enjoy the dynamic nature. It's never boring, that's for sure. But it can be nerve-wracking. I'll be honest, during the pandemic downturn, I had moments of serious anxiety about my future. I was brand new in flight training, and I had no idea what the market was going to look like in the future. I started thinking, do I need to change careers? These are real gut check moments. In the end, the industry recovered, and I decided to pursue it, but those sleepless nights left a mark. They made me a bit more cautious and aware that nothing is guaranteed. It made me tell any mentee or student, have a plan B, even if it's just a financial cushion or another skill set, because stuff happens in aviation. In summary, the instability of the aviation industry is a top reason you might not want to become a pilot. If you do decide to chase the dream, you might need to go in with eyes wide open. It's a wild ride and not just in the sky. Should you, shouldn't you? We've covered 10 big reasons that might make you think twice about becoming a pilot. The huge costs, the tough job hunt, the initial low pay, the grueling schedules, the health hurdles, the family sacrifices, the high stress, the permanent testing, the rigid seniority system, and the unpredictable industry itself. That's a lot of cons, and if you're surprised, I don't blame you. The shiny exterior of the pilot life often hides the realities. Now, you might be thinking, wow, with all that, why would anyone become a pilot? And that's a fair question. The honest answer from me as someone who is in this world as an instructor is you should only become a pilot if, despite all these reasons, something inside of you still burns to fly. For many of us, that passion, that love of aviation outweighs the negatives. We live for the thrill of takeoff, the pride of safely completing a flight, and the joy of seeing the sunrise from the sky. The challenges we discussed are very real, but so is the fulfillment some of us get from this career. I often balance the dream and the reality on this channel. I try to give you the reality, perhaps the harshest look at why you shouldn't do this. But if after hearing all of this, you're still thinking, you know what? I can handle those things. I still want to fly. Then maybe this is for you. In fact, every pilot who's happy in their job has made peace with these downsides or found ways to mitigate them. My goal here was not to dissuade you completely, but to arm you with the truth so you can make an informed decision. There's nothing worse than someone leaping into flight training, stars in their eyes, only to be blindsided by these issues and become disillusioned. We don't want disillusioned pilots. That's bad for safety and morale. We want pilots who knew the score, accepted the challenges, and committed because they truly love the craft. So if you're on the fence, weigh these 10 reasons carefully. Talk to pilots, talk to their spouses, get the real scoop. I think we covered most of it here. If these reasons have you thinking, no way, not for me, then that's okay. It's so much better to realize it now than after spending $100,000 on training. There are plenty of ways to enjoy aviation as a hobby without doing it as a career. But if you're saying, I'm up for it, I'll find solutions for these problems, I was born to do this, then don't let me or anyone stop you. Just go in prepared. I have a final thought. Being a pilot is as much as a lifestyle as it is a job. It's not something you clock in and out for. It permeates your life, for better or for worse. It will shape you and make you who you are. Make sure you're ready for that commitment. Thanks for hanging in there through this long video and this deep dive. I hope that this episode gave you some sort of insight and maybe some laughter, and most importantly, a clear head about the pilot profession. If you found this useful or brutally honest, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Consider sharing it with someone. If you're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe, or if you're on Spotify, follow the podcast and rate the podcast. Share it with someone who's dreamt of flying and they need to hear this. And as always, I would love to hear your thoughts or experiences, so please leave a comment down below. Did any of these reasons resonate strongly with you, or have you experienced these in the past? Are there other downsides you've heard of or experienced? Let's get a conversation going, because informed pilots and future pilots make for a better aviation community. Until next time, stay safe, stay smart. Whether you're on the ground or in the air, keep your eyes on the horizon. I'll see you next week.